Hi, my name is Lila Dawson and I'm 28 years old. I never believed in curses, in bloodlines, or in the idea that trauma could be inherited like I color bit that was before. I found the letters hidden under my grandmother's floorboards letters. She wrote to someone who wasn't alive anymore, letters that replete what happened to me and easy to explain. But I'll try. Before you listen, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this channel. If you love real horror based on emotion and memory, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. He never wanted to come back to Greystone Hollow, the town where my mother swore we'd never return. But after her death last spring, I had no choice. The house, the land, even the overgrown garden my grandmother once tended, all of it was in my name now. It felt like a cruel joke being dragged back to a place soaked in whispers and rot. But I needed to sort her things, clean out the attic, sell what I could, and move on. That was the plan. What I didn't plan for were the letters. He found them 3 days after I arrived. They were beneath a loose floorboard in the far bedroom, the one no one ever used. Each envelope was sealed with wax, faded with age, but the paper inside was crisp and touched. By time they were addressed to someone named Mira. I thought maybe it was a cousin or old friend, but the replies were in my grandmother's handwriting, and they were dated before Mira was even born. Strangest thing, some letters had my name on them, Lila, written in ink that looked fresh. The date, tomorrow. We laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Maybe my mother had planted them to scare me, but she'd never even come back here. She hated this house more than I did. Still, I opened. Don't need read. Don't go into the cellar after dusk. The voices come back strongest. Then keep the door locked and don't let her write to you. She knows your name now. I stopped breathing for a sec and then laughed again. It had to be fake. But that night I heard scratching beneath the cellar door, slow, steady, like someone writing on the other side. I didn't open it, but in the morning, taped to the inside of my bedroom window was another letter. The handwriting wasn't my grandmother's, it was mine, and it simply said, Lila, stop reading. She's waking up. I didn't sleep the night. I tried lights on phone and hand, a podcast playing just to drown out the creaks of this dead house. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the handwriting. My handwriting on a letter I didn't write. I tore it into pieces, burned it in a teacup, flushed the ashes. But when I woke the next morning, the exact same letter was back on my nightstand. No burn marks, no creases, just those 5 words again. Lila, stop reading. She's waking up. I decided I needed answers. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe my grandmother had some sort of journalistic hobby, writing fiction letters and sealing them up for her own amusement. It was a stretch, but I had nothing else to go on. I gathered all the letters, 13 in total, and laid them out on the dining room table. Half were addressed to Mira, a few to someone called the One Who Remembers, and still sealed had my full name on them, Lila Ann Dawson, with dates listed 2 weeks apart. Starting today, my fingers hovered over the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. You open this anyway. The cellar door is unlocked now. My head snapped toward the hallway. The cellar had no key. I'd checked the day I arrived. It had been locked tight, the knob and moving. I sprinted there and grabbed the handlight, turned easily. Wish I could say I closed it and walked away. But something was pulling me now, not physically, but like a pressure behind my eyes, a tug in the center of my chest. I opened the door and descended, each step colder than the last. The air thickened with damp dust and ink. That same coppery burnt paper sent from the letters climbed to the stair shelf. Down, I heard whispering. It was my name, and not scream, not threatening, just a soft, urgent whisper over and over. Lila, Lila, Lila. When I reached the bottom, I found the source of the voice, not a ghost, not a body or desk or wooden writing desk. In the center of the stone cellar, lit by a single candle that hadn't burned down at Alanet, another letter in Celadus. One wasn't addressed. That he opened it, hands shaking, and read, sit right back to her, or she'll come through the cracks. This time, just like she did with Mira, you're the last one left, Lila. If you stop responding, she'll become you. The floor creaked behind me. Didn't turn around. He just sat at the desk and picked up the pen. The pen was already full of ink. When I touched it, heavy, cold, I didn't know what to write. Who was I even writing to? But my hand started moving on its own, slow at first, like something was guiding me from underneath. I wrote, who are why? Ew, Why are you writing to me? I set the letter down and waited. I expected silence, maybe for the candle to flicker or a creak to curl across the ceiling. But nothing happened. Eddie left the cellar and shut the door tight, this time bolting it from the outside with an old iron latch I found in the drawer upstairs. Then I made coffee, tried to breathe, watched the clock tick. 37 minutes later, I felt it, a shift in the air like static in my blood. I walked back down the stairs. The candle was still burning, the pen was goniant. The letter had changed me. Handwriting was gunner placed with something sharper. Slanda ancientite said, "You don't get to ask questions, you get to remember. That is your role now. You answer, you suffer. You continue." The line. I dropped the paper and backed away, tripped over the first step and nearly cracked my skull. But I didn't run. I waited, and then I asked myself something terrifying. What line? That night I opened the second letter, the one dated next week. I had to know what came next. It read, "Mira made it 3 days. You're already past her. But you left the cellar and locked in your sleep. She touched your skin. You'll feel it by morning." I didn't want to believe it until I looked at my shoulder in the bathroom mirror. Handprint was forming, it bruised, not burned. It written was made of ink. Dark lines swirled into 5 curling fingers, as though someone had grabbed me and left a signature behind. That night, I dreamt of a girl, hollow-eyed, with skin made of parchment, her mouth sewn shut with letters. She reached out for me, and I heard the same voice from the cellar whispering, "She remembers what you forgot. She wants your name." I woke up screaming. The window was open and another letter was sitting on the floor beside my bed. He didn't write it, but it ended with my name. I couldn't keep pretending this was just paranoia. Something real was unfolding around me, something ancient, deliberate, and terribly familiar. The letters weren't a game, they were a system, a ritual, and I was now part of it. My shoulder still burned from the ink, handprint now pulsing beneath the skin like veins had been rewritten. I wore a hoodie all day just to avoid looking at it, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more I heard it, faint scratching beneath my skin like someone writing from inside my bone. So I did what I hadn't dared before. I searched my grandmother's attic behind a row of dusty lamps and an old cedar trunk. I found a metal box locked with a twisted loop of wire and sealed with black wax. I expected photos, maybe diaries. What I found were files, dozens of them labeled with first name, dates, and time of silence. Samira's was on top. He opened it slowly, hands shaking inside. A single faded photograph of a girl around my age standing on the front porch of this very house, smiling. A sealed letter, an open, addressed to Lila Dawson. A report, not official, handwritten, cataloging day of first reply, day of refusal. Mirror entry, total assimilation. I scanned the pages. Mirror had lasted 6 days. In day 7, she stopped replying. On day 8, she was found trapped behind the bedroom mirror, eyes open, mouth sewn with thinky gagged, not because of the horror, but because I remembered Mira's childhood memory. Her face at the edge of the garden, her fingers blackened with soil, always quiet, always staring. My mother had once said, "Don't play with the silent ones, they know what came before you." I never knew what she meant until now. The letters weren't written to strangers, they were written within the bloodline, generation after generation, each girl chosen, each one bound to the duty of remembrance. Yoni missed reply, broken chain in the silence. Spreads. He opened the sealed letter addressed to Mira, something my grandmother must have never read inside. The words were smudged, hurried. "If she speaks your name in ink, it's already too late. Burn the mirror, lock the floor, never stop writing. She survives on pauses, never pause." My breath hitched because I hadn't replied today. Downstairs, I heard the cellar door creak open, and for the first time, footsteps came up. I couldn't move. I heard the footsteps, soft, deliberate, like bare feet pressing into floorboards that shouldn't have grown. The sound crept up from the cellar, paused in the hallway, and then stopped entirely. But the house didn't go quiet. It shifted. The air felt thicker, as if the walls were inhaling my ears, filled with a humming I hadn't heard before, not mechanical, not wind, but almost like 100 pens scribbling on paper at once. I didn't know where to run, so I didn't. I stayed still. My grandmother once told me, "It's not the noise that kills you, Lila, it's the silence that follows." I finally understood what she meant. He turned toward the hallway, and there she was, not Miranit. My grandmother, her girl from my Dreams, the one with skin like parchment and lips stitched with black thread, only now her stitches were open, her mouth hung slightly ajar as if the threads had finally torn. She was taller than I expected to tall. Her eyes were black, not empty, but full like they'd swallowed ink and were still writing with it. She didn't blink, she didn't breath a bit when she stepped forward. The foregrown my name. Lila, I whispered, what do you want? And for the first time, she answered not aloud, but on the wall behind her, a new letter had formed in seconds, ink bleeding from cracks in the wood. Her message appeared one word at a time, each letter burning into place. Like hot metal, I want your pen. My hand began to cramp. I looked down. Veins in my wrist had darkened, black threads slithering from elbow to fingertips, the same ink from the letters. It was inside me now. She wasn't trying to steal my body. She wanted my right to write back. That's when I realized the worst part of all. The moment I stopped writing, she starts. He turned to run. Mirrors surrounded me. Every hallway, every frame, every sliver of glass now shimmered with reflections that didn't match me. They moved a half second too slow or too fast. One of them was already holding a penny. Screamed not out loud in my head because my mouth wouldn't open. I ran to the kitchen and tried to speak, but no sound came. Not even a breath. She hadn't just taken the ink, she had taken my voice. A pen on the kitchen table began to move on its own. He watched it scratch into paper, a message written in my handwriting. She doesn't need to kill me, she only needs me to stop answering. I didn't know how much time had passed. Minutes, hours, maybe a day, because the house had no clocks anymore. The moment she took my voice, everything around me began to unravel. The lights dimmed, but never flickered. Shadows stretched across the walls like ink stains reaching outward. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. My throat was locked tight with something thicker than fear. I was being unwritten, erased one letter at a time, and worst of all, the pen still moved on the kitchen table, dragging out my final thoughts in my own handwriting. Letter by letter, as if mocking the memory of who I'd been. Bit. Then something shifted. The candle in the cellar lit again on its own. I saw it from the top of the stairs, a faint orange glow, flickering like a heartbeat. Something was calling me down, not her this time. The house obeyed. When I reached the desk, I saw a final envelope, thicker, sealed with both thread and black wax, and marked not with a date, but with a choice: to be remembered or to be forgotten. The girl stood behind me now. I could feel her presence like static against my skin, but she didn't move. She was waiting, watching, and I realized something. She couldn't write unless I stopped. That's what they meant all along. The letters weren't to warn me, they were to keep her out if I stopped writing even once. She poured into my place like ink into an empty gesso. I grabbed the pen. My hand was almost completely black, now pulsing with her ink, but I forced it to write. Not a letter, not a replion, a memorythin. Grandmother, Elizabethan. All the Thirsty wrote every name I could find in the files upstairs. All the girls who came before me, one by one, I wrote their names until my fingers bled, until the ink on the page turned to blood, until the shadows in the cellar recoiled from the candlelight. Screamed not with her mouth, but through the walls, through the mirror. The reflection of me behind the desk warped, cracked, her face twisted, and then finally shattered into 100 silent pieces. She passed out on the floor. When I woke up, it was morning, real morning. The air smelled like dust and sun again. The cellar was cold, still, quiet. No pen, no letters, no candle, just a single note pinned to the wooden desk in my grandmother's handwriting. The one who writes last lives thank you for listening to the letters that answered themselves, written and edited by Dark Life Side Diaries. If this story chilled your bones and made you question your own handwritings, subscribe, like, and share with someone who checks their mirror little too often. And remember, next time you find a letter with your name, think twice before opening it. Comment below if someone wrote to you from the future. Would you read it?